we can dive straight into this if that's okay with you. Just to kind of familiarize yourself with audiences who may not be fully aware of you and what you do. Do you mind giving a very quick overview of who you are and kind of what you're best known for, if that's okay?
Sure. I'm a retired A&E physician, as people in the UK might call it, or emergency medicine. I retired from clinical practice about 6 and a bit years ago, and I started having powerful spiritual experiences as a kid, traveling out of body, energetic stuff, blissful states, some challenging experiences, and then started doing intensive meditation somewhere in the mid 90s, going on intensive retreats and started having a lot of powerful experiences, some of which have involved entities. And I still do a lot of intensive meditation practices and retreats. I've had a little bit of experience in psychedelics, not that much, and help. Somewhere in the late 90s, I hung out a shingle and said, if you're having powerful, mystical, magical, meditative, psychedelic, energetic, whatever experiences, and you want to talk about those, I'll be happy to do so, and I'll do so for free, even without a donation. And when you keep that shingle open and then write a book and are a doctor and found an online community called the Dharma Overground, where people talk about all their wild and strange adventures in the deep end of experience, turns out you get a lot of takers. So I got to talk to thousands of people about their adventures in consciousness, some non-trivial number of which had experiences with entities, what they thought were, UFOs, or, seemed like them to them at the time, including experiences by my mom. So, and my own experiences in these things. So, have had a lot of adventures in consciousness. So I led for a very long time these parallel lives of mainstream doctor who was told this is all crazy, needs meds, and experiencer and meditation teacher and helping people with these things. And now I'm working on a big project to try to put these things together called the Emergent Phenomenology Research Consortium, which I'm the main volunteer organizer of, and the charity Emergence Benefactors to support those. And so now I work on projects to help the clinical mainstream better understand the deep end of human experience, broadly defined, the highs, lows, weirds, plateaus, the challenges, the benefits, the strange phenomenology, and how to relate to those in a way that adds value and doesn't harm people.
Wow. Okay. You've been very busy then over the years, by the sounds of it,
That's true.
subconsciously and consciously as well in both sides. So yeah, I appreciate the quick overview there. So I guess there's the consciousness subject, the phenomena. It's the paranormal. It's quite a broad subject, and it can be interconnected in many ways as well. But in your experience, your opinion over the years, bearing in mind you've spoken to various people from different backgrounds, different disciplines. For the audience's sake, as it is focused around the UFO phenomena, in your opinion, what's the connection to the UFO experience?
That's a great one. So it's very complicated, but there's a lot there.
Mm.
Obviously, if you look at books like American Cosmic, they lay out very clearly and better than I probably could in long form the case for why, if you look at records of various experiences, it sounds like they're describing spaceships. It sounds like the things that people are seeing seem to in some way be filtered through their expectations, which is which you find in books like Intimate Alien, but that they're having experiences seems that way. And I've many times when I've had various experiences on the cushion with energies or entities or strange things or past lives, I've often gotten the sense that it was filtered or processed in a way that this human could make sense of, which is something
Mm.
that people also seem to report a lot, like the sense that what they're dealing with is more complicated, and what we can see of it or appreciate it or know of it, it may be a more limited thing. So that's a familiar recurring theme. And are angels aliens? Are they different? Did we only have angels and then we started having aliens in the 40s or 50s, and there's a sudden transition, or is it all kind of the same human phenomena back in the days of the Buddha, for example? A bunch of these texts back here in the tradition that I come from, there was this sense that they were interacting with very, very powerful beings from other dimensions, other planes, other realms. That's nothing new, that would fly around in the sky and cause all kinds of powerful effects, had powers, right? So to me, it looks very much like this is a thing, and people having experiences of bright lights, of transformation, of going up out of their body into various other places, going to various councils, or you see that in shamanic settings, you see that in Native American indigenous settings, you see that in you see it in all kinds of different places where people are talking about something that phenomenologically, to me, it's hard not to kind of put all these things together. Now, what do you do with the radar evidence? What do you do with the materials that people may have found? What do you do with any of that? That's a topic outside of my area of expertise. So I'm very curious, but I don't know. I keep an open mind. It's interesting. But what do you do with the experiences and the transformations and the massive ontological shifts that people have? Those don't appear to be anything new. That you find them in the Bible, you find them in all kinds of references, just text across the thing, going back to the axial age and before, going back to old Upanishads or Rig Veda or however old those things are. People interacting with what they thought of as gods, what seemed to have a lot more power than them, which came from the sky. This is really old stuff, and so to me, I'm relatively comfortable throwing these all in a basket of human experiences that seem to have more of a sense of a continuity than a discontinuity that started occurring in the 40s or whenever this, you think these sort of more UAP, UFO, specific alien and craft stuff started beginning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's, as you said, it's a very complicated subject, and it's fairly impossible to unravel completely because it's very dependent on the individual, especially as the experience has kind of evolved and changed. I mean, especially if you're looking at the shape of the craft, and maybe back in the day they were seeing dragons flying in the sky. I don't know, they couldn't really depict what they were visually seeing, so they kind of put it around to what they thought would be the norm at that time as well. But it does seem to adjust with the person's perception as well. Just out of interest, as you mentioned, you've had your own experiences. What's been the most profound experience for yourself that you've had?
Well, in terms of like entities, UAP phenomena, there have been a few that I've mentioned before on previous podcasts, but I'll just mention them now. The first one that was striking for me was I was on this meditation retreat, the Insight Meditation Society, and things around day 6 or 7, I can't exactly remember. It was my first intensive meditation retreat. All of a sudden, my body started becoming like energy, like particles, started feeling like it was dissolving in particles. If you've ever seen like someone being beamed up, right, on Star Trek,
yeah.
that it's really, where they kind of like start dissolving into a field of energy before they disappear, just like that. So like I was like, that's this is what my experience became. And then it felt like I was catapulted through the ceiling way high up. Like there's this like gap. I don't know what the heck. I feel like I slammed down back down into the meditation room, was buzzing, and the first thoughts were, wow, it felt like I was in an alien spaceship. Now, it should be mentioned that I have no memory of said alien spaceship. I was not prone to that sort of thing. I'm on a meditation retreat, but you have to understand at this point, I'm actually quite materialistic. Like, if you had asked me if I was a scientific materialist, I would have happily said yes. And a lot of this woo-woo stuff was crazy, and I'm not interested in all of that. But I was interested in awakening based on books like Gary Zukav's The Dancing Woolly Masters, where like it seemed clear from any physics, chemistry point of view that reality is an interdependent causal thing and there couldn't be free will. It was, my intellectual sort of thing at the time. Like, this is all clearly just a, unfolding phenomena. And yet I have this illusion of free will. Let's see if I can eliminate that, so my alignment is in conformity with science. Right. So that's, so the fact that as a pretty staunch materialist, I came to this were the first thoughts out of my mouth. And when I actually reported it then later to the meditation teacher, that's what I said. So I felt like I was dropped from a spaceship. I don't know about that, but it was a super powerful experience. And so anyway, didn't involve aliens or an actual spaceship that I remember. I don't know. But so that's the first thing. The second thing is I've had a reasonable number of experiences where all of a sudden I'm perceiving what feels as real as this, and there's some kind of an entity. I'll give 2 examples. One, I was on a very intensive meditation fire casino retreat, and this is where you basically look at a candle flame or a light source for a minute or so. You close your eyes, you focus on the after image, and whatever it does, if you close your eyes, most people will see colors or something, even if it just looks like static. You focus on that and you do that for a while, and then you open your eyes and you look at the light again when you're bored, and then you just do that in really high dose. And I was sitting there on the cushion in this rented tower in Scotland in February, this medieval defensive tower called the Tower of Halbar. And all of a sudden, the room vanishes. I'm in this totally different space, and there is the fire goddess. I'll just say, like the elemental fire goddess. This is woman of flame, basically, and she screams at me, "Become a king of fire!" And snap back into my body and whatever. Okay, it's powerful. And I'm going to tell one more, and this is not like, I'm not on a meditation retreat, so you see what you make of this one. And it's weird how our brains can hyper compartmentalize. And so it's Hurricane Fran. It's, I think, September 1996, and I'm in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, living in this apartment, and the hurricane has come all the way inland, like 2.5 hours drive inland. So it's like 120 miles or something, and it's making an absolute mess. It's an extremely intense storm. The next day, there were just huge oak trees that had been thrown through people's houses, and like it was very, very powerful storm. And about every hour and a half or so, an 80-foot pine tree like this big around is crashing into our roof of our apartment.
Wow.
And like the rain's going sideways, the lightning is super intense, and I'm looking out the window fascinated by this thing.
Yeah.
And suddenly there in front of me, I don't know where it came from, is a ball about 2.5 feet around of intensely crackling bright whitish yellow green energy, and it's just hovering there. I can see it just like I'm looking at you or this monitor. This doesn't feel like a hallucination or anything or whatever. And it's very loud. I can hear this thing, and it's crackling, and it's about 6 feet away from me out the window. I'm about a foot from the window. It's maybe 5 feet outside, and it's hovering at my eye height, which is about 10 feet off the ground. And it's just hovering there in this torrential storm, maybe, 10, 15 seconds, something like that. And it all of a sudden accelerates in a way that seems totally unnatural and just shoots off through the forest behind, like at incredible speed, and is gone, like bullet speed, instantly, maybe moved 1,000 feet in a second, maybe something like that. And it is gone. Is that ball lightning? Is that a UAP? Is that, I don't know, but I was just, James Yandoli had just recently sent me a link to this guy's description. He was talking about these energetic, brightly glowing energy spheres that he was dealing with. And I was like, oh, maybe this is a UAP. I don't know. Anyway, so.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
You've had quite a few different experiences as well, but the ball lightning one is pretty crazy, bearing in mind you wasn't.
That is some crazy stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you wasn't in the meditation, and people could be like, oh, someone might be like, oh, your mind was going, or use imagination. But if you're there.
I was working a day job and hanging out. I was meditating a reasonable amount in that period, but yeah, this does not feel like a hallucination or something. You could almost feel it crackling in the air, like it had this. It was buzzing, and it was quite loud. And then,
was it a frequency then? Was it like of that nature?
Like very intense. It felt like electrical spark crackling was why I thought ball lightning. But is that a UAP? Is that ball lightning? Is that a craft? Is that an entity? I don't know what the hell it was.
It's strange you mentioned the kind of intense storms and stuff. I mean, I'm from the UK, London. We don't have anything as crazy as that, but I used to have quite a few experiences, and I remember telling my brother that if there was a crazy storm that night or something of that nature, then I would more than likely have an experience. And I remember I kind of tested it out as well, because I was like, let me actually see. So when it did come up, I'll make a note of it as well. And not all the time, but most times I have some sort of experience if it was like thunder outside or something like that. So I don't know if there's a connection with it, but as you're just saying that, I'll kind of bring it up. But okay, well, look, I mean, everything you're mentioning, it sounds like something that really tests your understanding of reality, the world, who we are, what we're doing and stuff. So, I mean, it's something that, if anyone has been affected by any sort of phenomena, it's the natural question. It's the organic thing, right? Like, what was the point of that? What is life? You start to question things as well. So I wanted to put the question to you, if you don't mind, to find out what you think the motivations could be. I mean, obviously, you can't really say for certain. It's impossible to get a concrete answer. But in your opinion, what do you think the motivation or the objective of these experiences? Because that example just then, it popped up in front of you, crackling loud and zipped away. Why do you think that could have happened to you or anyone else if they had that experience?
That is a really good question. So there was the uncanny sense, and this is a really strange thing, that it was kind of like checking me out as much as I was checking it out. Did it just happen to occur in my window? There was the sense that it was just kind of like there, and it's like, okay, I got what I need, and it was gone. Like that's an anthropomorphic sort of secondary interpretive, but it had something of that vibe. So um, this is all purest speculation based on I have no idea what. Each of these feels different to me in terms of like if there was a why there, if you're trying to figure out why, what it might mean or something like that. Recognize these as from my own conditioning. The first one I think of as a stage I call the arising and passing away, where the body can become like it feels like very high resolution energy, like very, very fine particles. And lots of people describe that on meditation retreats, including a number of family members and friends and people I know, and hundreds, if not thousands of people I've spoken with. You can go on the Dharma Overground and read countless reports of this. So the sense that we are energy and the body becomes energy, but in that particular meditation phase, which is terminology that comes out of the Theravada Buddhism, it's also very, very common to have experiences of what we might call the powers, seeing through closed eyelids, being able to manipulate energy channels. And one of those is out-of-body experiences. One of those is entities. And people on the extreme end often report going somewhere else, having interactions with gods or goddesses or what feel like very, very incredibly powerful beings, strange alien landscapes, weird places. That is all par for the course in this particular meditation stage. And what is that? Some kind of insight into something much bigger and broader than ourselves is what it feels like. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, on the Fire Casino retreat, I was very, very specifically interacting with fire, candle flames, and the element of fire as an energetic thing. So from a sort of a magical point of view, from a more like a witcher wizard magical theory point of view, it doesn't seem like too much of a surprise to have invoked a fire elemental energy or entity or representation of the thing in a divine form or whatever it feels like, as again, purely interpretive. To have that show up is not that weird. To have it show up with that level of hyper vivid intensity, like more real than I'm talking to you now, is obviously very surprising and shocking when it happens. And I've been pondering what it is, what it might have, what does it mean to become a king of fire? It's a very powerful injunction. I've still been working with that as a koan. But the notion of being called to become something better, to become something more, to become a master of something is a theme that shows up if you talk to people about some of these experiences, particularly in meditative, spiritual, ayahuasca, shamanic, psychedelic contexts. It's not uncommon for entities to task people with some grand quest, some bigger thing of themselves. Fire is obviously an element of transformation. Brings light, also heat. It destroys things. It brings new things. It regenerates. It's power. How do you use power skillfully? These are all interesting questions I've been pondering. And it's not uncommon for people who have experiences with the phenomena to have some sense of a quest or an injunction or a mission that they're then on or given that they feel like they have to fulfill. This is mentioned back to biblical previous, times. Countless Christian mystics have, and other mystics across traditions have mentioned something like this. Not uncommon in UAP encounters, right? The entities, whatever they are, aliens, whatever you want to call them, have a mission for us, and we're supposed to do something. Not that it's always entirely clear what the heck that is, right? So, the contemplation of these questions is really interesting. And then, what to make of the ball lightning, the ball of energy. And it's funny, like I literally forgot about that for years and just didn't think about it because I have this weird ability to hyper compartmentalize. So, and then it's like, oh yeah, there was that thing. Somebody else had mentioned ball lightning. I was like, oh, I've seen that.
Yeah.
And then I forget about it. So like, this is a weird one, which it really does not, my brain doesn't want that to have happened. Like it does not fit with I've got no physics, anything that makes any sense of that at all. Like, ball of plasma contained by ultra powerful energy magnetic fields. I don't know what the hell that thing was.
It's pretty profound. It must have changed. It must have changed. It would change someone's thought process and perspective of life, wouldn't it? If you seeing that stuff, and I mean, it brings me to the point of like, when these type of things, these experiences can happen, it can send you down a road to figure out a quest, and maybe that could be the objective, right? The pathway, when you really have to start digging deep, and it makes you curious. And when you're like, for one, I've worked in a corporate environment, still do for my whole life pretty much. So me, going to work, and I'm in a sales job and having to kind of have these normal conversations, and then I'm thinking, well, last night I had a weird experience, and I don't think anyone's going to understand that. And you kind of have to really get your curiosity out to dig deep into that. And some people just just push it aside, so it's totally okay either way. But then some people can lose their marbles if they they really want to figure it out, and especially if it's a repeating thing, they don't get in control of it. So I know you've got some frameworks and stuff like that as well that help people and support people around this stuff. I mean, I wanted to get your take on this as well. What can people do if they're having these experiences? Is there anything in particular they can focus on or work with just to gain some clarity within these uncertain experiences?
Yeah, that's a really good question and a huge topic. So the first thing I will say is, while I super appreciate the re-enchantment of life, it going from, strip malls and workaday jobs to there's a whole realm of meaning and archetypes and energies and entities and dimensions and possibilities. I in general, really appreciate that shift. That said, as you mentioned, not everybody handles it well. It can be incredibly disruptive. And actually, by far, I have vastly more friends who have gotten into psychedelics, had some powerful healings or openings or transformations, or it's done something good for them, usually. And then they start getting downloads, they start getting stuff about, they start seeing stuff, they start hearing stuff, and they were not either trained with enough frameworks or built to, or psychologically don't seem to gel well at this level of their development with being in a magical world where there's entities and energies and demons and spirits and aliens and galactic councils, and the messages from the, they're getting from the land spirits and the whatever it is, like this combination of things overwhelms their meaning making centers in a way that starts to disrupt daily life function. And I very much think of mental illness, not in the sense of whether or not you're seeing entities or energies or gnomes in your garden, or the snake spirit that's in the tree, or whatever it is, but how you relate to that, and is it impacting love and work? So I actually return to Freud's original definition. If it's impacting your love and work, that's something we need to talk about and think about, because these are like fundamentally important things. And work might be something as valid as becoming a monk in a monastery, and that's your livelihood of, pondering deeply, or becoming a shaman in the jungle, where you're going to learn how to go into these things and hopefully eventually lend value to people. But a lot of people, as you say, end up getting really messed up. They can't function. And we deal with this all the time in the Emergent Phenomenology Research Consortium, actually, where some non-trivial number of people have had some very powerful experiences, and they're in the consortium because they're trying to figure out how to navigate life in the face of that, as they're also doing their PhD, or they're doing their, there might be a professor, or they might be a master's level, there might be a lawyer, or they might be, an accountant, or there might be some other professional thing. And part of what they're dealing with is, how do we stay grounded? How do we, yes, appreciate the richness and the re-enchantment and the messages and the downloads, but how do we keep the archetypal messages, which can be very grandiose and kind of distorted, like, like if I don't kill myself, the universe won't be okay, like, because I'm the savior of the next cosmic iteration or something, right? Like, it's a powerful message when you're getting it, but like, maybe there is less literal ways to interpret archetypal messages. So like, how to hold archetypal messages in a framework that isn't hyper literalist, because that often goes really badly. Like, as far, particularly some of the more martyristic, archetypes, when people start getting those kinds of downloads. And so then the question is, how can you give people what I call ontological flexibility, where maybe that's an archetypal message that I need to reinterpret? And I'll give a really simple example of this that kind of illustrates the concept, but is not that bad. So I have a bunch of wands made for me by the Acme wand supply guy, Kevin. Good stuff.
Mhm.
And I was thinking, I have a fire wand, for example, that has like a ruby, crystal from a laser in it, and it's kind of fun. And anyway, and so I was thinking, what would a water wand look like? What would a water wand? I was thinking like
Mhm.
water wand, water wand, water wand. And then I happened to be I was getting this like sense of download, something important about a water wand. I happened to be in, I can't remember, it was Lowe's or Home Depot, and I saw a pressure washer, and I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I need to clean off my tractor and get the algae that's making my sidewalks slick, and like, clean the mold off of my, housing siding, and like, wow. And I bought a pressure washer, which is like as water wandy as it gets. And it was like, yes, this is like one of the best things I bought in a year. What a totally awesome toy, right? So like, how do you, and that was a great download. And I'm glad it
Yeah.
finally connected to something real and useful. And I really like pressure washers. Is that like ultra suburban and like, whatever of me? Sure. But is it a really useful toy? Absolutely. And so like that's the kind of
Mhm.
shift that I think a lot of people often need to make with these kinds of messages, where, okay, yes, water wand, but pressure washer. See what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so,
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
how do you translate it to something that actually is here? And that's where I think a lot of people have trouble with. They weren't given this kind of sense of a framework that messages often come in very archetypal form. Become a king of fire. It's a very archetypal sort of a
Yeah.
message. How do you actually then initiate skillful change without like lighting things on fire or something,
Yeah.
becoming a pyromaniac or some weird thing,
Yeah.
right? So anyway, not that I do enjoy a good campfire now and then or something, that's useful, but like, how do you do something more skillful with that? So that's kind of that same kind of message is something that I think we need a lot more training in this culture in. I think one of the things that materialism did not do us in terms of favors is how to relate to things archetypal, things poetic, things mythical, and then ground them in something practical and day to day and useful. And I don't know necessarily the previous generations were any better at this, but I somehow imagine that they were, because they
Mm.
would have, grown up in a more mythic world where thinking mythically was, or magically, was more a part of culture until the age of the Enlightenment and then modernity and all of that stuff.
No, absolutely. Great answer. And I think it's really useful as well. And it's interesting you've mentioned that stuff because the ultimately, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it sounds like the message you're getting, you need to kind of translate it into reality,
Hmm.
ultimately. And that's it's something that I've been doing recently because you get information, or it doesn't have to be like a dream or anything. Like you could be thinking about something and then you see like this happened, that I saw music, I saw a tune, and the lyrics of it or the title of it, I was like, that's exactly the answer I'm looking for. And I was like, what do I do with it? And I went on a little pathway with it. And then I was like, wait a minute, I'm going around in circles. Doesn't make sense. I need to come back to reality a little bit. I need to translate it to something that you can see a result. Maybe I don't know. Maybe that's the way to look at it as well. But I think it's important. But once again, I think it can be difficult because some things are, it's difficult to translate into reality. But when that is, I think that's what comes to the point we have to kind of park it maybe. And the way this is my interpretation of it, by the way, is you leave it there, and as you said, you kind of keep things in the back of your brain, and then there'll be a moment that comes up where you'll be like, oh, there we go, that's where it was from. And I think that's the logical way to deal with it. And I think with a subject which is pretty crazy, you have to, or illogical, you have to apply to some logic to it, which sounds counterproductive, but it's probably the most productive way to be productive with this whole subject as well, because it's very up in the air and you need to kind of bring yourself down and be skeptical. You have to be skeptical of it as well. It's like, okay, that was interesting, let me just leave it there. And if it was meant to come up, and if you truly believe and understand that the universe works in mysterious ways and things apply to you when they're meant to apply to you, then it will come up for you at one point. But it's when I think people get attached to it and they really want to get that information, which I completely understand when something profound happens, because you're like, what the F was that? What do I do with that information? I need clarity on that now because I'm living my daily life. I don't know what to do with it. But I think there's a fine line between that as well. So that's very helpful. And thank you for mentioning that, because it's given, because I mean, I don't have a guide or anything or someone to kind of support me with this. I'm just working on my own in many ways as well. So you mentioning that feels like it's the right pathway for me to do with this information as well. So I appreciate that. A little synchronicity in me. Thank you, Daniel. Um, I had a really, yeah, wanted to say something. Sorry.
Oh yeah, just yeah, there's, and I have lots of other tips and tricks as well. So that was just the first one, like archetypal messages translate to something functional and mundane, right? Because often what it's going to translate to is going to be disappointing in comparison to the experience
Sure.
that sparked it, right? And so, a pressure washer is a very mundane thing you're just buying at your local hardware store. It doesn't have that archetypal resonance, but sure was useful. So like that kind of thing. But also then when the experiences are coming and people are walking around really compelled by the thoughts about these experiences, like grounding in the room, being able to find your body, being able to feel the sensations that are driving you to do whatever, being able to see the thoughts as these wispy little things, like just noticing the experience of thought as something that comes and goes. The very basic techniques from mindfulness of just watching thoughts as they come and go, so you can get a little space around them, a little space around the feelings in your body. This is a thought, this is a bodily sensation. Those kinds of really basic meditation things can be super useful. And I think sometimes doing that eyes open can be super useful, right? So just like eyes open, just sitting down. If you find some experiences like running you around and you're like chasing this or running from that or getting all worked up about this, can you just see these little thoughts as thoughts, the bodily sensations as the messages as the messages? It's these little sounds, little sights, little things happening in space, thoughts that you don't have to be contracted into. I think that's super useful. Having good friends who have been doing this a long time and have gotten to make all kinds of mistakes, as we all have. I'm blessed with a friend circle where we have made countless thousands of mistakes collectively in crashing around in this stuff. And,
Mhm.
as we've slowly gotten older and hopefully slowly gotten a little bit wiser in relating to the deep end weirdness, there is a maturity that can come from that, where, if you've been doing it long enough and had a lot of enough conversations around it, you can get this spaciousness. So connecting with friends and communities that have an ability to stay grounded, to stay functional, to stay real world basic, like that's extremely important. And then I'm trying to figure out how to get the global clinical mainstream to take up some of the slack in a way that is not is crazy needs meds, right? That can find some middle ground between doesn't exist or is crazy needs meds. What's that skillful middle ground of working with stuff? And there are psychologists and psychiatrists who already do this well, but a lot don't. A lot just say you're
Mhm.
psychotic, you're delusional, you need meds. There's no way to kind of build the tools and the skill sets that kind of can bridge these practical worlds like in some functional way. And so I think figuring out how to give my colleagues better tools for that is something I'm spending a lot of time working on.
Absolutely, and as testament to that, because there's individuals like yourself that are trying to bring some logic to this subject and some clarity, because it is written off very quickly by many professionals, and it's a shame. But then it's the human condition, it's pretty standard, but it will take some effort, and hopefully the whole UFO disclosure thing, if it does take trajectory in whatever route that goes, and I don't know where it's going to go. Obviously, we've got Louis Elizondo's book coming out as well. Hopefully, that's going to be a bombshell in a positive way. But that will hopefully tie together as well. But there's so much more to this subject than just, because I remember years ago I thought it was just a physical phenomenon, and then I was told that it's a spiritual one, and I was like, it's definitely not. And then I realized the last few years that actually there's a huge spiritual element to it as well, and this applies to everything as well. So it's a very huge overarching subject on pretty much everything we know, and that's why I think it's very important we get clarity. And some people may be resonating with UFOs, some may be more speaking to their dead grandma or granddad, or doing tarot card reading, or any sort of spiritual experiences. But from what I've gained in terms of, I mean, the last year, probably since I've been doing this podcast and speaking to loads of individuals, is that it's all interconnected in many ways. It's just dependent on the person, but we definitely need some sort of grounding there, because you can lose your marbles,
Hmm.
which is unfortunate. But it's just
And
part
you
of
could
it as well.
also get major upgrades, healings, transformations,
This is
benefits,
true.
psychological improvements. Like there's all kinds of great stuff that can happen out of this. So the figure how to get the clinical mainstream to appreciate the opportunities here for a real expansion and improvement of consciousness and one's world and one's life and one's day-to-day functioning, along with the weird stuff as that, it's like upgrading the operating system while the computer is still running, or working on your car engine as you're driving down the road. that can get
Challenging.
that can get very weird, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that the the experiences like CE5 and these meditative type states when they're able to, you know, like bring out UFOs into the sky, UAPs into the sky, or get them to materialize, and even the way the UAPs and UFOs they come into existence, you know, you've seen footage, whether it's raw or not, or you've had cases where they just pop out of existence, and you described your experience with that orb of light, which whether it's a UFO or what that was, but the way it moved, it was very, you know, altered reality type state. So I wanted to get your take on the kind of individuals who are able to willingly, and this is, I'm going to say apparently, and I don't mean that from a skeptical space, but I haven't experienced, I haven't been able to do that myself, so I can't really comment on it. I've only heard stories and I've seen some footage and stuff, but what is your thoughts on that, on how people are able to willingly do that?
So I haven't actually done CE5 protocols. I downloaded the app and then I don't have
Yeah,
no idea why I didn't. I often wonder if there aren't subtle forces that like push people away or
yeah,
towards
maybe.
things. I don't know. Is that paranoia or are they actually manipulating us? I have no idea. But I certainly have a number of friends who have done these things who I trust and seem like fine, reasonable, upstanding citizens to me. And they, you know, they report being able to do this. And I don't know why I should initially be, you know, super skeptical if they're just saying, hey, I saw this and I felt this, and there seemed to be this, and there seems to be an intelligence this, or a sense of presence of love that, or whatever it was, or ooh, you know, and the
Hmm.
occasional ooh, that seems that one's got really good vibes, or ooh, I don't know, that one has good vibes, right? That kind of thing. So you know, I keep a very open mind about these sorts of things, and they're certainly, you know, not even as weird as like the super intense ball of lightning thing that I myself saw, or whatever, or ship, or I don't know what it was, entity, I don't know, but like most of these things are not on that level. So like, and that's pretty
Hmm.
weird, right? That's a
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
weird thing. So I go, okay, um,
Through your like historical knowledge, can you think, is there any examples or you can think of where people are able to willingly summon like spiritual entities or anything like that? Because I think that could be a similar
well,
basis for it,
that's
maybe.
definitely a thing.
Yeah.
So I've engaged in all kinds of magical practices and intensive meditation stuff where we're doing visualizations and we're working with entities and energies. And I've been involved in magical circles, and calling up entities is a thing, right?
Mm,
Summoning is a thing. People have been doing it for thousands of years. It's nothing new. People do it today. And the degree to which one experiences that can vary widely, from subtle shifts in the energy of the air to just a feeling to a sound to full on three-dimensionally formed, seem real. You can actually interact with them. Sometimes you can even, you know, have like the physical sensation of touching this thing, whatever it is. And um those are all things that occur and happen and can seem quite compellingly, vividly, intensely, noetically, you know, with noetic meaning that sense of this is true, this is real, this is really happening. The sense of noesis can get quite powerful. And so those are experiences that people have today in lots of traditions all
mm,
over the world, right? That's not a surprise. And form the basis of major religions.
yeah.
And you know, so obviously having a causal effect. Now, it must be said, I'm strongly ontologically agnostic when it comes to everything. So I'm not saying I know what these things are in some true
Hmm.
sense, uh, but that these experiences occur, that they are causal, that they are reproducible for sometimes, is clearly true from the point that sort of point of view.
Yeah.
Again, not any statement about what they are. So I think taking these things seriously, at least from a clinical point of view and from an experiencer point of view, makes sense. And these things obviously have major impact on people's lives. So it's a funny thing to say something is not real when it is still causal. Like,
Exactly.
not real is shorthand for you're interpreting it in a way that I don't like the interpretation of.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
That interpretation is also arising causally on both sides. Obviously, our interpretations come from our causes and conditions of whatever. And so I'm way more, as a pragmatist, I'm way more interested in causality and what leads to good outcomes than I am in trying to dissect questions of reality for which I have no idea how to prove
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Even proving that this, like, you know, this ceramic mug is real is a very strange thing, because from a materialist point of view, there's actually not the color green. There are just photons that have whatever wavelength. this is all a representation in a brain somewhere. There is actually not the sensation of cold. That's just energy levels of molecules. So literally the sum total of my experience of this mug from a materialist point of view is not even real. Like all of this is contrived sensations to encourage survival in a holodeck that's occurring in a theoretical brain somewhere, right? So like even from a materialist point of view, this isn't real. It's a weird thing to say, right?
No, but it's the truth. It's strange.
But that's what materialism comes to. And so like that gives a lot of wiggle room for glitchiness and a sort of a looseness of how we hold things, I hope.
Yeah. I think once you understand that, or I mean, understand it is not probably the right word, but once you have, you know, a perspective of it. I remember I was walking down and I was listening to a podcast, and because it was years ago, I was walking around, I was looking at things. I was like, so he's looking at everything. I was like, so this might not, this is just my perception of what I'm looking at. Like, these are just things built up and I'm basing it on my reality and or whatever that is. And it really does kind of put into that kind of state where it opens up the parameters on what it could be. But I think it's all good because I love curiosity, and I've always, obviously, clearly you do, and people who are open to things. And I've never said you must believe what I'm saying. It's always about being open to the idea and just and being pragmatic. And there's this consensus on an idea where if you believe in something that is not of the norm, then you are ludicrous. You don't understand what you're talking about. But I explain to people, and I'm sure as you've just shared many times before, right? You didn't wake up one day like this. I mean, you've had some experiences from very early, from what I've know, but like you've experienced things, you felt things. So you can't say to that person, you didn't experience that. You'd be like, well, if you experience what I experienced, maybe you'll be where I'm sitting. If I didn't experience what you was experiencing, maybe I'll be where you're being. But having that kind of understanding to it is just so profound. And I think this is why it's so important to open this up and just create it. And we've been wrong many times before. I don't think people understand that. Like, truly, we once thought that we were the center of the universe and we lived by that. And I forgot the guy's name now, but he got absolutely damned for even coming up with the idea. They're like, you're absolutely crazy. So whenever I hear things that are a particular way, I'll just try to be like, okay, let me just wait a second, deal with that, because there could be a point here. You don't know. And once again, it's about just leaving it there, letting it season. One day it will come out the oven and hopefully it will make sense and it will be tasty and understanding. That's the worst example ever when it comes to putting it in the oven and the food. But you get the point, right? So I think it's crucial doing that as well. But no, definitely it's on one. Do you I wanted to ask just one more question, because I'm conscious of time as well. And I think it's because I was on Twitter a couple of days ago and there was like a debate going on about UFO disclosure. And then there was some people saying disclosures already happened. They're already here. They're just living in altered realities and we experience and live with them and we communicate with them and stuff. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that statement, because disclosure in the kind of normal, typical world we're thinking of is UFOs landing, or the government, the president standing up on stage and saying UFOs exist and we've been visited for many years. What is disclosure for you in your eyes?
Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously, on the spiritual side, people have been talking about entities and energies and seances and gods and angels and whatever spirits and things that can come from the sky for nothing. There's nothing new there. So I agree to you. To me, at least, when I hear the word disclosure, what I'm thinking of is a craft and alien bodies and warp drives and anti-gravity pods and whatever, how to travel between dimensions. Because some of the, like, as a someone who's studied some physics and things, like some of the radar stuff makes no sense, like instantaneous acceleration, 90-degree turns, going Mach 2 underwater, like, or whatever the hell. Like, that makes no sense from any ordinary. So new physics, new technologies, or scraps of crafts, alloys that we couldn't possibly have made. Like, that's encounters with, communication with, diplomacy with. That's what disclosure would feel like to me. And it's very materialistic again, because I already live in the world. I go on retreats. The retreat I was just on, people were talking about entities and energies and powerful downloads and presences and wild stuff. That's okay. But yeah, I is it weird that disclosure for me is such a materialistic thing or a physics thing, and that I phrase it and think of it in those kinds of terms?
Yeah.
Right. And that would be epistemically very different to me also from what I'm already used to and know. Right.
Yeah.
So
No, it's a good answer. I think that would give the people, I think also, once disclosure does happen, or hopefully it happens at some point, through the understanding of that, it will naturally coincide with the spiritual element anyway, because these beings, the way they operate, there's clearly something there where they're not using typical means, or they've got access to a higher technology. And I believe they're consciousness beings, obviously, and they're utilizing consciousness as a form to interact. So I think that would naturally coincide. So I think that would bring the people who are not, even considering that the whole experience could be a spiritual element or a consciousness element, it will then relate it together. So it's a good foundation because it's in reality. And then from there, you can just build up the other stuff from there, I guess.
yeah, it's kind of like when Dr. Sarah Lazar at Harvard and Martino's Imaging Center put meditators and scanners for the first time and showed there are structural functional differences in trained meditators' brains that you can see. That shifted the conversation in a way that it had not shifted before, right? You could go, okay, there's actually something materially different here. And so like the work I do at Harvard, you can show, okay, this connectivity actually changes reproducibly in certain states or stages. For example, when I do neuroscience with the team there, or also Cambridge and Imperial College London and other places that I'm involved in neuroscience projects, Florida State University, et cetera. And that epistemically is different for people when you can measure it with a material device. So I think, yeah, that will, if and when that happens in some better way than some blurry radar images and a few photographs here and there, like, yeah, when they bring out the craft and the president's like going, this is the craft or whatever, like, that will feel different. Assuming, that they let presidents know about these things, which, the endless speculation is that they don't, right?
Yeah. I mean, if I was to see a UFO land in East London, Stratford, I think it would shock the whole world anyway. But okay, super. Well, look, listen, I'm just conscious of time. I appreciate you're super busy. So before we do finish up, Daniel, and it's been really good speaking with you. I could probably speak to you for the next 6 hours, but obviously, even though time is an illusion, we haven't got that much time. Before we do finish up, where can we find you? Have you got any exciting projects happening? I think you mentioned some stuff before, but maybe you could just give us a quick snapshot of what that is and how people can help with it as well, maybe.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so at theeprc.org, the Emergent Phenomenology Research Consortium, acronym theeprc.org, you can find the big, global team that is trying to figure out how the clinical and scientific mainstreams can relate way more skillfully to the deep end kind of phenomena that we've been talking about and lend more value and have appropriate differential diagnoses and figure out how to do better than what they currently do. That's the big project I spend most of my time, social, financial, temporal capital on. And that is supported by the charity Emergence Benefactors, which you can find at ebenefactors.org. And that's the charity that aggregates funds and gives grants and provides other legal, logistical, and back-end IT and other forms of support for the network. And you can find my own site at integrateddaniel.info. If you're interested in some of the stuff I work on more broadly, or you can find my book at mctb.org, and you can find the project where we do these intensive meditation things that provide all these weird and potentially destabilizing and dangerous experiences at firekasina.org. That's Fire Casino with a K.org. And that's all free stuff. And my book is free online. The Fire Casino book is free online. I'm not making money on all this stuff, so not selling anything. Just trying to help other young scientists and clinicians and other people who want to help advance the project. And if you have skills, talents, resources, a large trust fund or whatever, that you would be happy to. You got a few Bitcoin lying around you don't need. We're happy to help you out. And yeah, thank you. Put it to good use.
Super. Absolutely, absolutely. So anyone interested in that, I'll leave all the links in the description. You can reach out to Daniel as well. Just wanted to know very quickly, do you ever do anything in London or the UK, any kind of retreats?
Actually, we've got a retreat hopefully coming up where we're going to be comparing Fire Casino to DMT with neurophenomenology, and see if we can shut Fire Casino phenomenology, this powerful visuals and stuff you get, with ketanserin, which is a selective 5-HT2A blocker. I'm still fundraising for that, so if anybody interested in psychedelic meditation crossover research, please, that could take us up to $500,000 to do. So the stuff, it does cost real money to do real research. Yeah. And to pay real people and to have real scan time and real, this is not cheap. So please help us out. And we hope to do that one. That won't be like a public retreat, but if you have unusual experience or talent or interested in participating, possibly being a research subject in that one, and you have a very specific combination of skill sets and sanity, then you could reach out, say hello. And that hopefully will be in the spring or early summer near Imperial College London, if we can get the funds for that.
Okay, good stuff. Not too bad. All right, then. Well, if I'm still sane by then, I'll give you a shout. Good. Well, listen, Daniel, fantastic speaking with you. Thank you once again. Everyone, please check out the description. All the information will be there. But yeah, Daniel, take care. Lovely speaking with you.
Thank you so much. All right.
Cheers.
Good luck to y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Keep
Bye.
your wits about you.